Good evening, everybody. I hope you're having a wonderful time. Thank you so much for joining us. This is DCSD Parent University. My name is Stacy. I work for the Communications Department at the Douglas County School District. And alongside our partner, Skybridge Medical Center, this program aids to provide monthly, engaging, relevant, and helpful content to DCSD parents like yourself. Without a doubt, starting the school year has been more stressful than most, which is why I'm so excited about tonight's webinar. So over the next hour, our guest speakers will take us through the basics of comprehensive social emotional learning, or SEL, what it is, how it's used in schools, and how parents can help their children cultivate well-being at home. So please join me in welcoming our guest this evening, Zac Hess, the DCSD Director of Health, Wellness, and Prevention, and Laurie LaComb, DCSD Health, Prevention, and SEL Coordinator. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A function to submit your questions to Zac and Laurie, and there'll be a chance to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to these two and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Stacy.
Well, good evening, everybody. Nice to be here. Like Stacy said, I'm Zac Hess, and I'm a Director of Health, Wellness, and Prevention. And Laurie is sharing the screen.
Trying. Did it go?
I heard that a lot of participants that signed up were in the middle school. That's where your kids were. And it's great. That's where I spent most of my time in the building, was a teacher, a middle school teacher and administrator. So know where you're at.
And I have children in middle school, and I've had children go through middle school. And I've also been a regular classroom teacher. I've been a special ed teacher for over 18 years. And then I've been working in this awesome department for the last 9-10 years, and very excited to be with you all today. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to let everybody just read this to themselves for a moment. Defining social emotional learning. So I'll give you a moment to read that to yourself. Oh, gee, sorry. So sorry. That makes it hard to read it, doesn't it? So sorry.
It's sensitive.
It is. So you might notice that there are some words that are highlighted in this definition. And the reason we did that is that we felt like these were some of the key words around social and emotional learning. It's really about human development. And this is a lifelong process. This is not something, well, let's touch on it in 3rd grade and 6th grade and again in 8th and, senior year before they leave us. This is an ongoing process that goes on throughout our entire lives. When we're talking about social and emotional learning, we're really looking at the knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So we're trying to help our students develop healthy identities. How can they manage their emotions, get to their goals, show empathy for others, very important. And yes, this can be taught. There's a great book on it called Unselfie, fabulous book out there. But an important skill that there's a lot of proof out there that we really need to explicitly teach it. We also want our children to have supportive, healthy relationships, and that they can make responsible and caring decisions. Now, I think everybody has kind of a different view on, or maybe has a little different definition of what that social and emotional learning means. This we took from CASEL, which stands for the Collaborative of Academic and Social Emotional Learning. This is an organization that's based out of Chicago and is solely staffed by scholars and teachers and educators around social emotional learning. We have been using a lot of their work They've been at it for years. We've been using a lot of their work to help us guide our work here in Douglas County School District.
All right, so great definition, and there's a lot in there. You know, Lauren, I think it's always really helpful to understand the why. So why do we really want to engage in this? And many of you joining us probably are like, well, we know why, but this graphic here, I think, gives a really good representation of why this social emotional learning is so important for their academic success and life success. When you look at this, it's the building blocks of learning, and it's from Turnaround for Children, and it is just that. It's like if you look at the top there, and those three things at the top, that's what I think we could agree we want our children doing in school, right? We want to have to have a lot of curiosity and that self-direction, and have that civic identity and all that good stuff. And what this is saying is you're not going to get there unless some things are taken care of before then. And that's what we mean by that building block, or building that foundation. And so it's color coded. Those things in gray, that's the foundational stuff kids need and adults need, really, but we need these things to be able to get up into those blue places, which are awesome. They're great to have resiliency and have agency and be tenacious with our education. I mean, this is all really outstanding things. And this is what I think, you know, especially here in Douglas County, we really, you know, have some very relevant and rigorous academics, and that's great. And if our kids don't feel like they belong, so that attachment piece, if they aren't able to manage this stress that is just out there, if they can't regulate those emotions, just kind of keep themselves in check and regulate it and learning, the brain doesn't get to those blue colors. It just can't. It's just a physiological thing. It's a science thing. It can't get there. So we have to have these things in place to be ready for school, to be healthy emotionally. And that's where the social emotional learning comes in. That's the goal. It's to try to get those great things well established so that they can really engage in these other academic pursuits and life pursuits. So next one. So some of the benefits, I mean, I kind of said some of that, but you can read some of these things, and the higher levels of student success, right? Again, those upper places in cognition it's going to be able to happen with this social emotional learning. You can see the numbers for the number of people, 10% point gain in academic success. We see that all across in the research of growth and achievement is higher when you're engaging with the social emotional learning. It also improves the teacher. So one of the things we talk about a lot here is our first approach, and you'll see this later, but we really try to promote with our schools is first adult SEL. And that's providing skills and the space for teachers to develop those things. We need our adults in these kids' lives to be able to be self-aware and self-regulated and be at that state so that they can do the best teaching again. It lowers the risk of adverse outcomes. Reduction of problem behaviors. Again, if you're able to attune to your emotions and keep things regulated, well, then there's going to be less behaviors, and you're going to have a much more regulated classroom and a lot more learning going on, and a lot less reaction to behaviors and emotional outbursts and all that good stuff. So there's going to be less discipline, more teaching, you know, and the relationships. The big thing there is, we know that number one protective factor for kids is connection and belonging and relationships. Number one. So against all the adverse childhood experiences a kid could, you know, go through, if they feel like they belong and connected to adults, to positive peers, and to that school community in their classroom, man, they're going to succeed. And when we're talking about building those social emotional learning skills, it allows them to establish those positive relationships and to be aware of their surroundings and what other people are going through and all that. And it makes a huge difference.
Well, and to talk a little more about the why social emotional learning is so important, we wanted to touch base on the brain. Very important part of learning, very important part. So just a little lesson on the brain. You might know most of this, if not all of this, but it's always a good reminder. So our brains, they grow from the fastest from the back to the front. So when they're for early development, back the brain's starting to develop at a very fast rate because we have to learn how to see and to walk and how to talk and how to move. And then we get into the limbic system, the lower part of the brain. And for you middle school, high school parents, your children, that is a part of the brain that is growing at its fastest rate right now in your child's life. And then the front part of the brain is the last to fully develop. Which is very interesting. It really takes about, until our mid-20s, even into the early 30s for our brains to be fully developed. The front part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain is responsible for all our executive functioning. And this is what we're always asking of our students in school, where we need them to plan, we need them to make decisions, we need them to focus, we need them to have working memory, we need them to follow through, we need them to socialize. This is happening, that action, that work is happening in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Now, the limbic system, which all information comes to first, in our body has all these sensory receptors through it. It's always pulling up information in through the brainstem, and it's going to go through your reticular activating system. It's going to say, okay, pay attention to this and this. And then it goes to your limbic system, and it always is going to talk to your amygdala. And your amygdala is your fight, flight, freeze mechanism. Very important part. We also have the hippocampus in our limbic system, and that's where we store all of our long-term memories. And those two talk. They talk because the amygdala wants to make sure that the brain feels that we have the resources to handle the situation in front of us. If the amygdala feels that way, information is sent through the hypothalamus and it goes to the prefrontal cortex. Great, then this part of our brain is working. We want that to work all the time for ourselves, for our children, right? In all environments. But what happens is when the limbic system goes, what we say could flip the lid or feeling super threatened or emotional, the hypothalamus actually sends signals down to the adrenal glands and starts to produce cortisol and adrenaline. And those are the hormones that speed up our heart rate, reduces digestion, makes all our senses super sharp, and it tells us to stay wide awake, pay attention what's going on. The only thing is when that happens, and it's a great protective factor for us, but then that information isn't going clearly to the prefrontal cortex. The body takes over. And so we have to help the brain calm that part of the brain, the limbic system, calm the amygdala, and so information can go to the prefrontal cortex. And so it's really important that we are creating very safe environments. And what Zac was talking about, these connections and relationships are number one. That is where our students will feel fully safe. And then, that limbic system's like, oh, I've got this because I'm in a safe place. So our prefrontal cortex is going to work really well. And that in those situations, that's when we can teach explicit SEL, where we are teaching some of the competencies that we'll get to shortly. So that was pretty much the why. And the reality is that there is no separation of mind and emotions. Emotions, thinking, and learning are all linked. And Dr. Eric Jensen's written many books about teaching effectively. He's an amazing author, but it's really that we used to think these are in silos. They're not. Our emotions are connected to our learning, and our emotions are connected to our physical body. It's all one. So many of you might have seen this. This is what we refer to as the castle wheel. And these have been a nice guiding light for the work that we've been bringing into classrooms as a springboard to social emotional learning. So when we talk about social and emotional learning, we're looking in our schools to have comprehensive social and emotional learning. So what that means is we just don't teach SEL on Mondays and then that's it for the week, right? It just isn't, we need comprehensive. A lesson on Monday might be part of that. And then how we interact on the playground and how we're guided by our EAs is another part of comprehensive. And then maybe we do restorative practices in our classrooms. And so there's a lot of elements that play into comprehensive social emotional learning. But we like to use this as a springboard. If you look at the circle, those I call them pie pieces, but those are what we refer to as competencies. And these are the skills that we want our students to develop pre-K all the way until they leave us, which could be as long as 21 years old. Okay, so we want to work on self-management, and that's about managing your emotions and behaviors. We want to work on self-awareness, recognizing emotions and values, strengths, and our limitations. Super important to really be honest with ourselves about that. Then going into the green pieces of pie, really looking at social awareness, really understanding what are the needs of the people around us. And then the relationship skills, how do we form positive relationships so that we can work effectively in teams? And I would say that green part is super important this school year, because last year our students didn't have the opportunity as much to socialize and be around other people. And some of those skills get lost. And I would also argue to say that we need to continue to work on self-management and self-awareness in order to be effective in our social awareness and our relationship skills. And finally, responsible decision-making. And teenage parents, I'm sorry, you know, it just doesn't always happen, because guess what? This isn't formed all the way. They're not quite ready. They need a lot of help with it. And they do need to make mistakes in order to understand what the right decision is to make. But in schools, we work a lot on how to make the right decisions and how to make goals and how to achieve your goals. What kind of decisions do you make to get to those goals? So you might also you'll see there are circles that surround these competencies. It's really important to understand for all of us that social emotional learning isn't the responsibility of one person. This is really all of us together, this community together. We need to help our children grow socially and emotionally. So that starts in the homes, of course. We've got in our classrooms and our schools as a whole. We can't just have one classroom doing and not all of them, right? And then we also have our communities out there. What are the messages coming from our religious institutions, our community centers, our local parks? And so it's really this, you know, a comprehensive approach to all of us helping develop. Zac, did you want to add anything to that? I was kind of going on and on there. Okay.
You explained it very well. Okay.
So we have a lot of ways that comprehensive social emotional learning is supported in our schools. It's really important, and I think most people understand this who are part of the system, that we are a site-based school district. So every school's got its own unique climate and culture, and we respect that 100%. So we're going to go through some of the programs that our schools do utilize. If we name one that you're not sure, oh wait, does my school, they might not. It just depends on what the school has chosen and what works for them. The other reality is you can't do them all at once. And if you want to get good at one of these skills, one of these approaches to social emotional learning, you got to do it for a while until it becomes part of the climate and culture. And then you can add in the next kind of program. But when we go through these, I don't want you to think like, oh, these are, I have to have all of these at my school, because that just doesn't work really well. So Zac, I'm going to ask you to talk about the supports of a multi-team, because this is really your GM.
Yeah, and so what Lori was saying though, and also though with this, they are aligned. So, and I think that's the biggest message we promote to our schools, is so they don't feel like they're all these separate things. It's all good social emotional learning. That's why we're calling it comprehensive social emotional learning. the multi-tiered system of supports, that is a school's or district's organizational framework, how they organize things. From team shared leadership to looking at data to actually using evidence-based practices to having a layered continuum of support, meaning you're starting with prevention and universal stuff that happens for all kids. Then you have targeted tier 2 supports and targeted tier 3. And even in social emotional learning, a lot of what you hear about is universal, right? Like what's going on for all kids in the classroom around the connections and community building. And our counselors, our psychs, our social workers in those buildings, they use social emotional learning in the tier 2 and then in tier 3. They still help kids try to manage emotions, to be self-aware, to do all these things so they can be resilient. They have that fortitude to get through tough times, and they're using those same social emotional skills and that learning at the targeted and intensive levels. Restorative practices, a lot of schools are engaging this. There's a lot of misperceptions around what it is. And it's first and foremost about community building, and it's about relationships. That's the basis of restorative practices. Yes, there is a discipline component that would suggest we shouldn't be using punitive consequences, and that we should really involve our community and work to repair any harm and conflict that's done, and then work to reintegrate a kid, right? We say a lot, separate the deed from the doer. We have a lot of unfortunate and inappropriate behaviors, but people, their self-worth and who they are, that's important that we honor that. And they're still good kids. They just might make some poor choices. And then we help them figure that out and learn from it. It's truly the word of discipline, right? Actually learning something from our mistakes. I'm sure all of us have had plenty of opportunities to learn from our mistakes. It doesn't mean we're bad people that we made them. So that's restorative practice. Build the community, work through harm and conflict as a community. Trauma responsive practices, we know this is big. There's a lot of adverse childhood experiences out there, and many kids that have been impacted by that. A pandemic, that's an adverse childhood experience, and some kids will come through it fine and others won't, and they'll be adversely impacted. So there's a lot, we're trying to promote in our classrooms that we're just doing good stuff for all kids, and these good trauma responsive practices are good for all kids. It's about predictability. It's about good social emotional learning. It's about feeling safe. And like Lori said, when your brain, right, if you're in your thinking brain, that means it's in control. But when we get into our stress brain or our safety brain, then that part of the brain takes control because it's supposed to, because that's how we evolved, right? If a saber-toothed tiger comes jumping out of the bush, you don't think about it in cognitive, like, I wonder what could maybe happen here in this situation. No, your safety brain, right? That part of your brain, your lizard brain, or however you want to say it, that takes over, and you run or fight or do one of those things, right? To survive. That's survival brain is really what it's called. So we got sources of strength happening. It's an awesome thing. We got in a lot of our middle schools and high schools, and even an elementary piece of that. And that is around, it is definitely a suicide prevention program, but it is great social emotional learning. We got questions that we're going to talk about, but it's helping kids find their strength. So it comes from a strength-based thinking, not a deficit-based. And so that's what we're trying to help kids identify. Like when times get tough, like how do we get through it? Like we all have strengths. Like we have positive adults, positive peers. We have other pieces of this pie that we teach to help kids just identify with a strength that's going to get them through the tough times. The RISE grant, the Resilience in School Environment, that we have a grant going on there, and we've got schools in that, and it's using it's a partnership with Kaiser Permanente and CEI. Isn't that who it is, Lori? So a lot of great social emotional learning happening here, helping schools really identify, again, things that are going well, and maybe some gaps that they have, they want to identify and create plans to work through that. There's they're doing it smart, getting data, figuring out what those gaps are, and then making plans to build that resilience. And it's about kids' resiliency again. So a lot of this is, we know stuff's happened, right? And we want strong, tough kids that can know their resources and get through things, right?
So I just want to note,
Yep.
There's a slight typo My bad. It is 6th through 12th grade. It is not 6th through 8th grade, and it's
Oh.
on here, so 6th through 12th grade. And just one more thing about our RISE schools. The first year we've been really trying to focus on our adults and adult social and emotional learning, because we know they're the role models and they are the ones who create these safe learning environments. And so we want to, that grant is working with them, moving into affecting students as well. So a couple other programs that we have going on to support comprehensive SEL. We have a Healthy Schools program. I've been part of it since I've been with DCSD I've been here 15 years. And we focus on the whole school community child model. And it really looks at what are the 10 components that support a healthy, engaged, challenged, safe child in our school system. And in our classrooms and in our schools. So we work individually, our team does, with each school to create their own school health improvement plan. And this can be around physical activity, because we know that's great for brain functioning. It could be around nutrition. It could be around social and emotional learning climate, staff wellness, health education. I won't go through all of them, but that's what we do. And we support them through all the steps to really try and help improve their whatever data they have at their school that they want to work on. So for example, I was at Bear Canyon for many years, and we noticed there was a lot of junk food walking around that building every day, 10 times a day. So we just started working on, let's reduce the amount of sugar that we eat throughout our day at school. So we started doing some really just fun alternative ideas to that. And we actually had a great improvement on it. So I can go for a long time about healthy schools. I'll be quiet. We also offer a lot of prevention programming, bully prevention, relationship safety, e-cig smoking cessation, trauma responsive teaching. We do a lot of PD from our department. And we also, a big part of what we do is we help support schools in their SEL curriculum choices. And we try and help them figure out the best way to provide professional development to their staff. We have a team.
Lori, before you get into the team, just a kind of a reminder for everyone, we've been talking a lot about this social emotional learning, and there is an opportunity to ask a question about this, like just before we kind of move into some specifics in the team. But if you wanted to ask a question, then go for it, and we'll just continue. Keep going, Lori.
Okay, cool. Good reminder. We have a strategic plan in Douglas County School District, and one of our themes is around social emotional learning. And we have combined our teams of prevention and health and social emotional learning. We've made one team, so we have more people power, and there are now 9 of us, and we each serve a feeder to support every school and how they are delivering comprehensive social and emotional learning in their school setting. So as a team member, each person's assigned. So if you are assigned to Castleview, you will work with the high school, middle school, and the serving elementary schools. And you will go in and just see where they're at and see if they have a team around it. And we actually, last year during the COVID months, we created a comprehensive guide based on Castle's work, that collaborative of academics and social and emotional learning. And we created a guide to help walk schools through a sustainable programming plan to continue the social emotional learning. So it's not just something, oh, well, we did it in January and it was great, we're done. No, this is something, a continuous process of looking at it. How are we doing? Are we meeting our goals? What do we need to improve on? What kind of data do we have, and so forth. So we're really excited about this work. We're just getting started. We're excited because tomorrow we're actually meeting with all the leadership teams in the district. So that's a win for us.
Can I add just a couple more to that? To this
Please.
Amazing team that Lori leads, by the way. You know, so they're going in there to really help these teams understand a lot about this comprehensive SEL. So they might have some training they're doing around restorative practices or the trauma. There's a lot of our schools that are really getting want to dig deeper into this trauma responsive practices. And so a question I saw in there that we can answer right now is about the curriculum for social emotional learning. So like Lori said before, that the schools, were site-based. So what we're trying to do for the schools, and this is along those lines of that multi-tiered system of supports, one of those essential components of that is evidence-based practices. So we're going to go through, the team is to vet curriculum, make sure that it is researched and evidence-based, that it has data to support what a school's needs might be. So a lot of this is around looking at data and being very intentional and saying, hey, this is a need you identified at a school. If you really want to engage with a curriculum, then here's a few suggestions that might work. So some of the big ones you might have heard about, like Second Step, right? That's kind of a popular one out there. And so, but just so you're, as a parents, are reassured that the ones that we recommend, that we would promote, are only ones that have the evidence to back that and fill a need that a school might have. Now, what our goal is that we're not using curriculum necessarily. I believe, and I think Lori and I are on the same page, that curriculums can be a great start. They can help people to be intentional around it. But we really know we've arrived in this social emotional learning is when it's just integrated in the content, right? That teachers are just naturally helping kids build relationships, right? Helping kids build resiliency through their content, through the instruction day to day, and how they set up their classroom as a community, and that's the work they engage in. So all of that is stuff that this team is going to try to help schools if they want to engage in that and they want that help, to help, because a lot of schools, I mean every school, they're already engaging in this social emotional learning, and we want to be really clear about that your kids are in good hands. These schools are all doing social emotional learning. Some may be exploring different aspects of it. Some have identified, again, like I said, using data, specific needs that they might have within this work. And that's the team's job, is to help kind of coach. So we want to coach and make sure that, they're able to ask the right questions, look at the right data, and pick the right things themselves, but then also be that consultant where we do have some expertise, right? We've been doing this work for a while, and we're able to go in there and provide some specific direction or examples or help with the data interpretation and analytics, so that they can make the best choices. So this isn't, this team that Lori's leading is a new team, but the work of social emotional learning within the district is not new. There's a lot of folks out there doing incredible stuff. We've been doing this for a long time. We're just trying to get more intentional as we go.
And just to add a little to the answer to that question about curriculum, we have been utilizing CASEL's approval process for SEL curriculums. They have a very rigorous process to get on their approved list and their select programs and their support programming. And because they've done every program has to go through a research procedure in order to get approval from CASEL. So we do that. We use that to help us guide the work around, well, this is a good curriculum, because a lot of SEL curriculums are hitting the streets these days. So we want to be super aware, and we want to try to find the most engaging, the most appropriate, and the most effective for our kids. So before we go into the next slide, I think we just need a moment, because we've been talking for half an hour and you might be tired of hearing us talk. So we're going to just do a quick little breathing activity. So I don't know how many times, a mother, I have 5 kids. I've had to have these moments with my own children. I'm like, let's pause and take a few deep breaths. Okay. So, and we actually go into classrooms and we teach a lot of different breathing activities, because we know it helps shrink the amygdala, that fight, flight, freeze mechanism in the brain. So this is a really easy one. Maybe you can do with your kids if you're ever, and I like doing this with actually middle school kids, because they can do it under their desks. They can do it very inconspicuously, but everyone do it with me, because then I'll feel, great. Okay. So take one palm and then put your pointer finger from your other hand into the middle of your palm. And I want you to imagine there is a figure 8 there, or an infinity sign. And we're just going to trace that 8 or infinity sign with our finger. And as we go around one side, we're going to inhale. So we go, And then we exhale the other side. Let's just do that 2 more times. And then just take a normal breath in and a normal breath out. And that's just kind of a nice little strategy. I call it figure 8 breath. They can do it on their legs, on their desk. Sometimes it just helps to feel it. All right. So we wanted to talk, one of the questions that came up repeatedly from everyone who is, not from everyone, but from participants in our webinar tonight, is what are some coping skills you would suggest for emotionally overwhelmed kids? So we're going to just go through this list and try and elaborate a little about each one. I'll start, we'll just ping pong me and Zac on this. But so the first thing is model. So as I said earlier, we have all these sensory receptors all throughout. We're always taking information, like an exorbitant amount of information comes in all the time. We don't even aware of it. And kids are always watching, they're always listening, they're always learning. Not that we need to be perfect parents or perfect teachers, because perfect isn't real, but we can be real, authentic human beings. And we can do our best to model the self-awareness, the self-management, the social awareness, the relationship skills, and the decision-making. Talk it out with your kids. So for example, I went to a college visit with my daughter over the week, and we had to make some decisions. And I kept kind of walking through the steps to get there. So she would learn, like, when you're on your own, these are the things I considered, And so just thinking out loud, modeling for your kids, they learn so much that way. So I'll be quiet about modeling. I can go on. Zac.
Well, and I think part of that, though, is to model even when you do make that mistake. And it's probably appropriate that I'm talking about that part and not you, Lori. But when I do it incorrectly and maybe lose my temper or, something like that, it's coming back and talking, because my kids are learning and saying, hey, Dad was really dysregulated. Dad was angry and I didn't handle that well, right? I could have done this. This would have helped me a lot more than instead I did that. And I think that helps them, because it is how it's life, man. We get stressed out, and I practice this stuff all the time, just try to keep myself regulated. I do a lot of meditation and mindfulness because I need to. And so when I'm stressed, then my go-to is not so much that. So anyway, so practice self-regulation when things are calm. This is such a really important piece, is to really work with your kids, and at the times when everything's going great, right? And so they get to know what some of those practices are that we could do to regulate ourselves and do things. And like we were talking about, one of the examples is my son, when he starts to get dysregulated, going and jumping on the trampoline is really helpful for him, or doing something kind of physical is works really well with him. And so even when he's calm, he'll do something like that, and we'll take that opportunity to say, hey, how does that make you feel? Oh gosh, it made me feel good. I feel like kind of energized, but in a good way. And those are such important things. We try to teach, we do teach our teachers when we're talking about learning tools. They call them fidget toys, but I really think they're regulation and learning tools. That we try to teach that when kids are regulated, like, how does that make you feel? Is that a good one to use? Because there's a lot of different things that we can use out there that help kids stay regulated. But doing it in the moment is not usually the right time. So
it's there's a lot of great resources out there for different ways to self-regulate. And it's really getting to know themselves, like what works for them. Just as Zac had talked about that sources of strength, in our resources, we did attach the wheel to this. So it's really it's like more of a wellness wheel, where what are your strengths and what are your supports that you can reach out to when things get tough. So really trying to lean into our strengths when things get difficult, And then also look at the things when we're feeling like we need a new challenge. What are things that we can strengthen that aren't strong enough yet? I'll talk about the next one too, Zach, because this is my
Yeah.
thing. So another thing with our kids is finding balance. So we all need some downtime. The brain needs downtime. It's called your default mode network. And you need time in that part of your brain to just process the information, to come to solutions, to think things out. But you can't do that if you're always involved in something. If you're just always involved in something. So there is a calendar activity I learned through when I went through a mindfulness training with Mindful Life, and Kristen Race wrote the book Mindful Parenting. And take your students' or your child's calendar, and write down for a week or two how many activities they're in, and then color code them. How many of these activities are very active and take a lot of their mind and their space and their time, and I would do that in red with my kids. And then how many were there just some more calm downtime events happening every day. And then you start to see, like, oh my gosh, my kid went Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, straight through. Just woke up early, after school, went to the gym. Then they had a choir practice, came home and did homework, and they went right back to bed. They did the same thing. How can you start finding a little more balance? And practicing quiet and stillness is something we have to practice. And that doesn't involve the phone, and it doesn't involve the video game or TikTok, as entertaining as it is. So really just helping your child identify, are they balanced?
I think that works great for adults too, Lori, right?
Yes.
Like maybe we do it with our kiddos and we do our own calendar,
Yep.
because again, we're the adult, right? And we got a lot of responsibilities and we need balance too. It's important. It doesn't just all of a sudden as an adult, I don't need balance. I absolutely all do. Or we
True.
aren't at our best. So, and that goes to the basics, right? I mean, back to the basics, it sounds, whatever, basic, but it is. I mean, water, eating right, getting enough sleep, that one should be like in bold and highlighted, and movement. I mean, you don't have to go to the gym and work out, but getting up and moving is important. So I notice this in my own kids. I can tell when my daughter especially hasn't had any water or drink. I mean, it's telling. And it's like, hey, honey, maybe get a drink. And then it helps if your body system is working well and you're taking care of it, then the rest will follow. We've known forever that sleep is one of the best things we can do for a kid's mental health, and even in adults, but even more so as an adult, because that brain is developing. It's going through so much change and using so much energy to create these neural pathways that if it doesn't get a break, it gets dysregulated, and then it becomes, we're working in safety kind of things, and then we're getting into survival brain, and then the cognition stops. So for our kiddos, you can Google it, but I mean, generally, I think right now, like for our middle school and high school, we really like 10 hours. I mean, it's 8 to 10 hours. I mean, 10 hours is asking a lot, but 8 to 10 is not. 6 isn't cutting it. It just isn't. And I know that's what they're doing. I know that we have things up against us, like our start schedules and all that stuff. I totally understand that. It's very hard to get our kids with their circadian rhythm as they're getting into our teens, to have them waking up early, getting to school early, and then trying to get them to bed early when their circadian clock is like, I'm not even tired. It's 10:30 and I'm not tired. And I'm like, how are you not tired right now? I could have gone to bed 2 hours ago, right? But that's just where they're at. So the best we can do with that, and if sleep is being, we just can't do it, then let's make sure we're eating healthy, good stuff, a balanced meal, not a bunch of crappy sugar. We do that in us as Americans. I mean, it's amazing. Lori's got me on this kick. But if you start looking at ingredients and notice the amount of sugar in every single thing, it's like craziness. So, but like just a balance, right? Yes, don't deny everything. Denial is not balance. So you got to have some, right? And just hydration. So concentrate on that and getting some good movement in there, and then compensates for maybe some of the sleep.
Awesome. My 8th grader, first week back, what was that, a week or two ago? Every day he came back and I looked at him like, did you eat your lunch? He's like, not really. I'm like, okay, let's start with that. And he was like kind of cranky and not really nice. So just starting with that's a great place to start. When your child is feeling emotionally overwhelmed, it is suggested sit with them. Let them know, that this is what they're going through. It's happening. It happens to all of us. Sometimes it's just, you need someone to sit with you and make you feel that you belong, you matter, we care for you. And then help them identify where they're feeling it, and then help them to name it in order to tame it. And that's a Dan Siegel, he's known for that, is like, once, and that's part of, that self-awareness is like, what is the feeling can I name it? Where am I feeling it in my body? And can I name what that feeling is? So one of my kids, she's always like, oh, Mom, I have anxiety. I have so much anxiety. And then I'm like, well, tell me more about that. She's like, I'm like, where do you feel? She's like, my chest gets really tight. And I'm like, and what are you thinking about? She's like, well, I'm just worried. I'm not prepared. And I'm like, so do you have anxiety or are you worried? And she's like, well, I think maybe I'm more worried. And then I'm like, well, what's worrying you? And then we start to break it down and just talking it out and just listening. It's a huge help. It's really big. We have more ideas. Go ahead, Zach.
Yes. Creativity. There's a lot of research out there about just encouraging that. I mean, and it's different for everybody, but you think of some of that traditional, like painting and drawing, some of the maybe performance arts type of stuff, singing, listen, but being creative and creating thing is just a healthy thing, one, to just stay regulated. Another one of my son's coping skills is he draws. So when he starts to feel a little overwhelmed or just like kind of angry about things, I'll find him come to his desk and he'll just start drawing, and that regulates him. So that's a really good thing.
And building stuff too. That's a good one.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's a good one. Going out into nature. One of my favorite books, Nature's Fix. If you're interested in the effects nature has on your brain, it is proven to calm the central nervous system. Get outside. I know Colorado air has been less than fresh lately, but still get outside, sit by a tree, check out all the amazing grasses out there, get up in the mountain, get outside. It's really, and they even say, if you can't get outside, it's not the exact effect as if you are outside, but you can put pictures of nature around you, because the fractal patterns in the nature are easier for our brains to process. So if you have it on your screensaver, if you have a big TV, put the big, we have our TV, it like shows pictures of mountains and rivers and stuff. Get into the nature.
Love it. Managing technology, always a big issue, especially as our kids get older. Right now, I could hear my wife right now trying to get my son off the Xbox because he's got practice. So this could get interesting for all of us. But it's tough for these kiddos. There's a lot of input. It really does kind of hijack the brain. And so managing it is important. And even though we do put limits on it, like you get an hour, bud, and it's still really, really hard. And so especially the sleep, because we talked again about the sleep and how important sleep is. There's research out there that'll tell you, I think it's about 60 minutes, an hour before bed to kind of put the close stuff. So if they're on their phone or an iPad and it's that blue light close, different than if you're 10 feet away from a TV, but the real close blue light of a computer or something like that actually stimulates the brain, and it makes it harder for them to sleep. So then they aren't tired, and when they try to close their eyes, they can't, and it makes it very difficult. So just remembering that.
And also help your kids find a good calming spot for them in your house. Where's that spot? My kids, they all kind of that place they go to when they're like overwhelmed and they just need a little quiet time. Help them identify that if they don't already have that.
Absolutely. When people, even as adults but kids especially, they get escalated or dysregulated, it's giving them that time and space to do that. And I know this is hard as parents. I mean, it's hard for me in certain situations, especially to just let them be dysregulated and play out that emotion. But it is important to have the space and let them do that at the beginning. And then then we can start. Sometimes they'll want to be right next to us, right? They still want to be there and they don't want to be off in their calming space. They want to be with us. And that's a safety thing. I mean, it's like, okay, I know I'm not being appropriate right now, but I do know my mom and my dad or whatever are safe. And so I'm going to be there and still be, you know, maybe not super nice. Again, for us, then we need to start, we got to help keep ourselves regulated in those things. And then we can use some talk to help, like modeling. Again, when I get dysregulated, when I'm feeling tough like this, I can take some deep breaths and that helps me. And I know before I've seen you take breath and that can help. So some of the kind of language works really well. Yeah, that leads into the mindfulness techniques.
We have a ton of those on our website, but breathing again helps shrink, it helps calm that limbic system so information can go to the wise part of the brain. There's a lot of apps out there, Stop, Breathe, Think, Calm. I love 10% Happier. Also a calming corner. We have a virtual calming corner we're going to share with you, so access to that. There's a lot of mindfulness stuff. And what does mindfulness mean? It means being present in the moment with kindness and curiosity without judgment. So it's just really helping us get into that present moment. And we can do that through our senses. So tapping into those strategies is also really helpful. We had two other questions. One was about supporting students in a changing environment. I'll start here. It's just really providing as much structure and scheduling as possible. And again, allowing for that downtime. Change is inevitable. It's the only thing that's consistent. We know it's always going to happen, but it can really cause some stress for people. So we structure what we can, we schedule what we can, and we give ourselves time to breathe.
Yes. And that goes right into that. We said it a lot, and this is also why we emphasize adult SEL in our schools as a primary focus, but the role modeling on how you get through change. You know, and that's some self-work we have to do. It's some of us don't do change really well, and it's hard, and there's been a lot of it. And so how do we get through it, and how do we help our kids? So remember, do the things that you need to do for self-care so that you can stay regulated, so that you can handle the change, because it isn't fun. We got so much on our plates as parents and things going on in our job and all this kind of stuff. And, you know, if we're not taking care of ourselves and role modeling that, and how can we even be expected to role model how to like get through adversity? But
right.
Again, our kids are really watching that. Yeah.
We always say do with, not to or for. But if we're gonna do a game with our students, we're doing a game with our students. We're gonna do breathing with our students, we do breathing with them. We're not gonna do it for them. We're not gonna do it to them. And it's much more effective that way.
Much more, yes. And I think listen is really important. I mean, It's just validating. I mean, it's, you know, there's a lot going on. We have a lot, as adults, we have a lot of tools in our toolbox, right? We've learned a lot throughout the years to be able to have some resilience and grit and get through tough times. Our kiddos haven't, right? They're developing. That's hopefully what social emotional learning is going to provide, give some really good skills and stuff. But listening and letting them feel validated, like it's okay that you're feeling this way. And then I'm here to help you get through it. And we got some strategies, we got some skills. Let's think through this. Like, what does this mean? And let's create a game plan. We're like, it's changing, we're moving, a divorce is happening, whatever it is. These are some big things that kids have to deal with. So let's listen to what they have to say about it and how they're feeling. And let's work on it together, like with them, again, like not to them, not for them, but let's do it together so they feel like, hey, I'm part of this, right? And I'm going to get through it. Builds their self-confidence to getting through tough times.
So powerful. And you had asked for some resources. So we have a nice pile of resources here for you and Stacy will be sharing the PowerPoint with everyone. So you have all these are links. But Castle, we refer to many times, they have a whole parent section. We have a virtual calming corner that we created. It's accessible to everybody. It's got videos and meditations, and it's got drawing, and it even has a video on how to make a calming jar and a recipe for that. We have our Healthy Schools resources because we've done a lot of work around the area of mindfulness the last 5 or 6 years. Our DCSD mental health support and resources page is helpful. Talked about that strength wheel. Let's all focus on our strengths here. And actually, today we were in a meeting and our wonderful lead for psychs and social workers, she shared this video with us, and it was really fabulous. And I would say it is applicable to all age levels. And then if you need anything, please reach out to one of us. We're here to help and serve you all. And we're honored to be in the position to do that. So I think, are there any questions in the chat we want to touch on?
No, not really questions, just a nice comment.
Okay.
I hope this was beneficial for everybody. Thank you for being here and taking some time away from your families.
Absolutely. And in the middle of a work week, mind you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, if that's all the questions we have for today, for this evening, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Give me just one moment, because I would like, I'd love to get some feedback from everyone attending tonight. We're constantly trying to make this program stronger and more relevant and more fulfilling for parents. So we'd appreciate your input. Tomorrow you'll receive a link to the recording of this webinar, the PowerPoint presentation, and a link to this survey that's on the screen right now. That's the bit.ly/startwithwellbeing. You can go there and fill out that survey now. You can also use this QR code if that's a little bit easier for you. I also want to invite you to our next webinar that is on Wednesday, September 29th. It is our Youth Vaping Recovery Prevention and Intervention webinar. And this will be led by Dr. Katrina Iverson from Skyridge Medical Center, the new Pediatric Emergency Medicine Director. It's consistently one of our most popular webinars, and it's very informative. And really, when you look at the CDPHE's studies over the years with Healthy Kids Colorado, about 1 in 4 Colorado teens vape regularly. So it's very, very relevant, and it can be very helpful and informative. And you can get information on that, as well as a link to register at dcsdk12.org/parent-university. And Laurie, Zach, always a pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to everyone out there. We hope to see you in the future.
Thanks for having us, Stacy. Thanks everyone for
Thanks,
joining us.
Bye.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.